Today at Home Built Workshop, we're building some furniture. We're gonna make a couple of end tables and a coffee table. Black walnut. Stick around. What's going on? Welcome to this episode of Home Built Workshop. I hope you are having an awesome day. We're going to have some fun on today's project. Today we're going to be doing some woodworking with some nice black walnut specifically. We're going to be doing a little bit of welding and metalworking, and when it's all said and done, we're going to have a really cool coffee table and a couple of matching end tables. Today's project is going to start out at my local hardwood dealer, JW Hardwoods in Peyton, Colorado. For those of you in the area, I highly recommend dropping by, checking out their shop, check out their selection of woods. Really cool place. We're going to be doing a lot of the rough dimensioning there at their workshop, mainly because of space constraints. You guys know I don't have a lot of space here, and trying to work with long boards, especially ones that are kind of heavy like these are going to be, it's a lot harder for me to do it here and takes about 3 times as long as utilizing a shop with the equipment like JW has. So we're going to jump in, get out there to the shop, make a few cuts, and start getting this project rolling.
We're going to start out by cross-cutting this 8/4 black walnut down to rough length. And here's our stack of roughed out pieces. Black walnutty goodness. Then we're going to head over to what is probably my favorite machine at JW Hardwoods, and that is this really cool old Madison straight line rip saw. This saw puts a perfectly straight edge on the board that's glue ready right off the saw. And since this is glue ready right off the saw, we're going to go ahead and glue up the larger coffee table top right here in the shop. That way the glue can start drying while we finish processing the smaller pieces. Then it's back to the Madison to finish straight lining the shorter pieces, which will become the end tables. The cool thing about using this saw, as opposed to me trying to do this in my shop, is we can straight line these at the exact dimensions I need, so that when it's all said and done, these things are already cut to width, and all I have to do is finish gluing these up. And there's the last piece for our end table tops. It's time to head back to the shop and glue these up ourselves.
After dragging these pieces home, it's time to take this one out of the clamps and work on gluing up the other 2 smaller tables. Don't worry, we're not done. Oh, that's heavy. Oh. This is awkward. See, this is why I had that done out there. We're nowhere near done with these tables. Oh, that's heavy. That's heavy.
Now I'll apply a little bit of wood glue and just clamp this panel up.
Once this glue dries, it's a rinse and repeat. We'll be right back with both of these glued up. And there's our final top.
I'll use a sharpened scraper to remove the squeeze out. Make sure you wear safety glasses at this step so you don't get it in your eye. Ask me how I know that.
With all 3 pieces glued up, I'm ready to move on, but in order to save you some of the repetition, I just want to let you know that what I'm doing to one piece is going to get done to all 3. They're all going to be the same thickness, they're going to get the same finish applied, everything's going to be the same, so I'm just going to try to focus on the steps in what I'm doing. Just know that I'm doing the exact same thing to all 3 pieces. Now, let's get these to the drum sander. There we go, flat and smooth. Now, I understand that in the video, it looks like I ran a couple of passes and we're done, but I want to be completely honest with you guys and let you know that this took a lot of work. Since my drum sander is only 16 inches wide and these pieces are 22, you can see right away that one pass is not going to cover the whole thing. Since the drum sander is an open-ended design, there is a feature built into it which allows you to slightly tilt the table a few thousandths so that you can run wider pieces through there. If you didn't do that, a lot of times what will happen is it'll sand a ridge right where the end of the drum is, and that ridge is really hard to get out. Now, I had to spend a fair bit of time making sure that the drum sander was adjusted nice and even so that it would function properly, and then for every pass I had to run these through. I actually had to do 2. And the 46-inch long coffee table, well, that was a little tricky in and of itself, but enough of that. We are done with that process, finally, and now ready to fill some of these knot holes. To fill in knot holes like this, you could mix up some epoxy, maybe some wood glue and some sawdust, but I'm going to use some good old CA glue, super glue. My super glue of choice is made by Starbond, and I use this stuff all around the house, all around the shop. It's really good stuff, and I highly recommend, if you guys haven't tried it, to at least check them out. They make super glue in all the different viscosities, thin, thick, medium. They have a brown, they have a white, although I haven't used the white. I should try that on something. I'm going to be using the black CA glue for these knots. I think it's going to blend in really cool and look really nice with this black walnut. If you guys want to try out some Starbond for yourself, this video is not sponsored by Starbond, but I do have an affiliate link down below. You can click that, save 10% off of your order by using the link in the video description. Let's fill some knots. Let's give it a few squirts of accelerator, make sure it's dry.
And then I'll use a card scraper to level these spots out.
Now I'm going to take a couple of minutes and make sure that these pieces are nice and flat. Now in theory, the drum sander should take care of this for us, but I want to double check because this coffee tabletop especially is quite heavy and awkward to run through the drum sander as it's hanging off both ends as well as the side. So I just want to double check, knock down any high spots that we find. I'm just going to use a long straight edge and check in lots of places around this piece. Right here in the middle, we got a little bit of a high spot. To knock that down, I'm going to use a hand plane to remove most of it. The rest of it we should be able to sand from there. Now I have this hand plane set to cut paper thin shavings. I don't want to take a deep cut here. I want to be able to just barely shave away the high spots. We're going to go nice and slow and careful. And see, I'm barely shaving anything off here. Nice and slow.
This process really is exactly the same as you might use for flattening a workbench top. I'm working across the grain and kind of switching directions and forming a crosshatch pattern as I flatten it. Now I believe that this hump down the center is really caused by offsetting the table on my drum sander a tiny bit. It's not very big, but it is there, and this process will get it out.
That looks pretty good. Now I'm ready to square up the ends and get these pieces cut to their final length. For that, I'm going to use my track saw. Ah, come on, who are we kidding? I don't own one of those fancy gadgets, although they are really cool and it would make quick work of this. I'm going to use a piece of plywood with a couple of fences glued to it. Give me a nice 90-degree angle, and my handy dandy circular saw. I made my own track saw. And my clamp fell off. That's cute. These clamps without the little clutch thing in here are about useless. Not bad for a homemade track saw. And now for everyone's favorite part of any project.
With most of the sanding out of the way, I'm going to use my router with a 45-degree chamfer bit to put a very small chamfer on all the edges. This is purely decorative, but I really like having that chamfered edge. It's just another surface to catch the light.
That looks cool.
And I'll run over these pieces one more time with some sandpaper to remove any marks left by the router. Now I'll wipe the piece down with some mineral spirits to remove any dust as we prepare for finish.
So I just learned something. After wiping this down with mineral spirits to remove the dust, I realized that the grain was raised. Well, when I grabbed this at the store, I didn't really pay any attention. I just grabbed what was on the shelf, but apparently this is a green version of mineral spirits. Still says it's compatible with oil paints and all that kind of stuff, but this definitely needs to be sanded again, which is unfortunate because, well, this thing was ready for finish. Now I gotta sand it again, and I can't use this to remove the dust. So this was, well, sorry, green mineral spirits. Can't recommend it.
So it's back to the sandpaper. This time I'll just wipe the dust off with a rag and some compressed air.
Shake well before using.
I'm using a satin wipe-on poly for the finish on these. I like the satin look, but I also like the protection of a polyurethane. I guess maybe I should rename this as a pour-on poly.
While I'm waiting for this finish to dry, we may as well fire up the welder and start building the bases that these tops are going to get attached to. I've got a ton of pieces of 1.5" square tubing that I picked up from my local steel yard. The cool part was I was able to send them the cut list for all the pieces. They cut them to size for me, so now all we got to do is stick these things together.
Before doing any welding, I'm going to wipe each of these pieces down with some acetone. This is to remove oil and grease that may be left on the metal. There's quite a few pieces here, so this step alone took a little while. To do all of the setup and the welding, I'm going to use a cast iron tabletop that I know is really flat. This will hopefully keep everything flat and square while I'm welding it up. Hey look, we made a rectangle. After making a bunch of rectangles, it's time to connect them. I cut out some mounting tabs and drilled some holes in the center. These are going to be used to attach the top to the base. I want to plug the bottom of the legs on these tables so that it sits nice and flat on the floor, so I'm going to cut a bunch of small squares that'll fit into the end of the tubing. Now I can use a magnet to hold these caps flush with the end of the tubing and tack them in place.
Now I'm just going to take some time and fully weld each of these joints to make sure this thing is rock solid. This is probably going to take a fair bit of time because I got to do this to all 3 bases, so I'll see you guys back with all of these joints welded.
With the bases fully welded up, I'm going to use a flap disc on my angle grinder to flatten out all of the welds. Now if you're one that says just leave the welds, it looks cool that way, kind of that industrial look, I 100% agree with that statement. However, my old worn out MIG welder does not. The feed is really unreliable and it's very challenging for me to get a good seamless weld using this setup. Don't worry though, a welder is on my list of eventual upgrades. Now I'll go back to some sanding. I'm just using some 220 grit on my random orbit sander to prep all of these tubes for painting. I'm spraying these bases with a satin black. I think the satin base with the satin top is gonna look really cool. I had to come up with a good way to hang these pieces so that I could get to all the sides to paint them. Thankfully, we have a tractor around that worked perfect for this application.
Well, now that we have finish on the wooden tops, we have some paint on the steel bases, it's time to combine the two and get these things wrapped up. This process is probably gonna look exactly like you'd envision it. I'm working on a soft blanket to avoid scratching or marking up the top. I'll just line everything up, making sure my overhangs are nice and even all the way around. Then using the hole drilled in the mounting tab, I'll use a self-centering drill bit to drill a pilot hole, and using a washer and a construction grade screw, I'll attach the two. The washer's just there to add some support for the screw. There's still plenty of clearance around the mounting hole to allow the wood to move however it wants to move without binding up and possibly breaking a screw. Well, I'm going to call this project a wrap. This ended up being an awful lot of work since there was 3 pieces all together, but I'm really happy with the way they turned out. It's time to get these loaded up and delivered to the customer. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next time.